In our previous video, we were factoring quadratic expressions in standard form when a was equal to 1, and now we're going to do the same thing, except a is not going to be equal to 1. Let's jump right in. Okay, I'm going to write out a question for us to factor. Here we have 16x squared plus 26x minus 12. Now, if you remember our steps from yesterday, we always begin with the first step, which is asking ourselves, is there something that I can remove that's a greatest common factor between these terms? So, is there something that's in common between 16x squared, 26x, and 12? Well, first, let's look at the coefficients. I have all even numbers, so what is the greatest common factor between all of them? The greatest common factor between all of them is 2. So that means I can divide each of these by 2. If you remember what we were doing yesterday, we were doing it like this, right? And then we were writing the answer to this question inside our bracket. You can do the division, or you can ask yourself, 2 times what will give me 16x squared? However you want to think about it, you can go ahead and do that. Okay, so then I have plus 13x minus 6. Okay, so now that I've done this, I can factor what's inside the brackets. Now, things are a little bit different when a, our a value here, does not equal 1. So right now we have an a value of 16, right? Yesterday when we were working, it just looked like this. Right? And what I was doing was finding the product of negative 12, and I was finding the sum of positive 26, right? Well, how we get negative 12, we were calling it the C value, but what we were actually doing was, let me grab a different color here, is we were taking 12 and we were actually multiplying it by the a value, which just happens to be 1 here, right? That is how we were getting 12. So now that we have an a value that's larger than 1, when we multiply a and c, we're going to get a new number. Let's continue with this question so you can see what it looks like, okay? So I'm looking at the terms inside my brackets. Those are the ones that I'm going to be working with. So I see that I have an a value of 8 and a c value of negative 6. Well, I'm going to have to take those two and multiply them. What is 8 times negative 6? It's negative 48. So I'm going to have to do factors of negative 48 so I need a product of negative 48, and I need a sum of my b value. That doesn't change. My sum has to be, I'm just going to write positive 13 and running out of space, sorry. A sum of positive 13. All right, so just as we did in the previous video, we're going to go ahead and write out the factors of negative 48. I see that I have a negative product, so I know that I'm going to be working with a positive and a negative factor. So let's get started, and you know me, I always start with 1. Times negative 48 is going to give me negative 48. And if you remember from yesterday, our product is always going to be negative 48. Okay? When I add them together, do they equal positive 13? No, it equals negative 47. You can't really see that. I'm getting cut off there. That's okay. All right, and I'm just going to draw them all out, or write them all out rather. But you're welcome to go ahead and jump straight to factors that you think will work if it works better for you that way. But I want to do this to show all my work and my process. So I'm going to move to 2. And I've got 2 times negative 24 equals negative 22. I'm going to try negative 2 times 24. That's just going to give me positive 22. Okay, next one I'm going to try is 3. I'm going to do 3 times negative 16. That's going to give me negative 48. And when I add it together, I'm going to get negative 13. All right, here we go. Negative 3 times 16. That's going to give me negative 48. And that's going to give me a sum of 13. So those are the factors that I was looking for. Awesome. Now, what's going to happen here is you're going to continue to bring down your 2. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave a little more space so I can show you. You're going to bring down your 2. You're going to bring down your 8x squared. But what's going to happen is those two factors that we just found, negative 3 and positive 16, well, we know when we add them, it gives us positive 13, right? So what we're going to do is actually break apart this middle term. So I'm going to write my negative 3 over here, my negative 3x, and then I know my other term is what? Positive 16. So I'm going to write that over here, plus 16x. So you got to think about taking that 13 and breaking it apart into those two factors that you found in your table. Because if you do negative 3x plus 16x, you will get 13x. You're going to get your sum. All right? And then you just bring down your negative 6, like that. The reason that we're doing this is because eventually you're going to see that we're going to create a binomial common factor like we were doing before. So let's continue. The next step you're going to do is bring down the 2 again, but now you're going to focus on, let me grab a color here, these two terms and these two terms on their own. Okay, so start looking at those two terms. Excuse me. And, oh, yes, it came up. Okay, it's working. And you're going to ask yourself, as always, is there something common between them that I can pull out? So what is that? And we're going to have to work with a square bracket here because we're going to be working with more than one set of brackets. So if I look at 8x squared and I look at negative 3x, so first look at your coefficients. Is there any factor that's common between the two of them? No. So there is no GCF between 8 and 3, but I do see that I have two x variables, and the greatest common factor between those two x variables is just x. So all I'm doing here is the same thing we did in the first step, right? So now I'm going to divide everything by x, or I'm going to ask myself, x times what is going to give me 8x squared? Well, x times 8x is going to give me 8x squared. And then I'm going to look at my 3. X times what is going to give me negative 3x? Well, x times negative 3 is going to do that. Now I'm going to continue on to my next set of terms. I'm looking at 16x and negative 6. I'm going to look at my coefficients. Is there something in common between the two of them that I can pull out? What is the GCF? Well, the GCF here is 2. So it's going to be, I have my plus sign there, plus 2. And then what times 2 is going to give me positive 16x? Well, 2 times 8x. And then what times 2 is going to give me negative 6? It's going to give me negative 3. Okay, do you see what we just did there? Do you see the binomial common factor? If you look right here, there is a binomial common factor. So what we're going to do is bring down our 2, and then I'm going to take that binomial common factor and write it in my first set of brackets. And then I'm going to look at my remaining terms, which is x plus 2, and I'm going to write that in my second set of brackets. And that's it. Let's do another few examples so you can get used to multiplying the A term and the C term for your product, and also so you can get used to splitting that middle term. Okay, so here's our second example. We have 3x squared plus 8x plus 4. Okay, so I'm going to look at my quadratic expression here, and the first thing I always ask myself is there a common factor here? Is there a coefficient that goes into 3, 8, and 4? No. And there's no greatest common factor between my variables either, so I'm going to start with step 2. Step 2 means I am finding the factors that I need to find. Based on the product and I know I'm going to need my sum. So the sum you can do first if it's easier for you. My sum is positive 8, right? Now I'm going to look at my A value and my C value because I know my product is A times C. And I've got 3 times 4, which is positive 12. So I have a positive 12 product, so I'm looking for factors of positive 12. Now, are my factors going to be both positive, both negative, positive and negative? What are they going to be? Well, I have to look at what signs I have here. I have a positive and a positive, so I know that my factors are both going to have to be positive. Okay, so let's start with the factors of 12. I have 1 times 12. That's going to give me 12, and when I add it, it's going to give me 13. No good. Okay, let's go to the next one. I have 2 times 6. 2 times 6 is 12, and when I add it, it's 8. Lovely. So I just found the 2 factors I'm going to be working with, positive 2 and positive 6. So let's do what we did in the last example, which is we bring down that first term. Nothing happens there yet, right? And then we're going to break apart this middle term, right? This 8x. If we break apart this 8x into the 2 factors we just found, we're going to get 2x and 6x, right? Those are the 2 factors we just found in our table, and then we just bring down that 4 plus 4. Now what we're going to do is look at these terms in relation to each other like this. So I've got 3x squared plus 2x. What is in common between these 2 terms? Is there a greatest common factor in the coefficient? Well, 3 and 2? No. Is there a greatest common factor in my variables? Yes, it's x. From each of these, I can pull out one x value, right? Now I have to write what's left in the brackets. So I'm just going to do it in the way that I like. If you want to divide, do that off to the side of your page, right? 3x squared divided by x, what are you going to be left with? I'm just going to ask myself, what times x is going to give me 3x squared? Well, I know it's got to be times 3x. Okay, and then I've got plus, and now I have to ask myself, what times x is going to give me 2x? Well, it's just going to be times 2. All right, then I'm going to do the same thing with my next set of terms over here. I got 6x plus 4. Okay, so look at my coefficients, 6 and 4, even numbers, so I know a GCF I can pull out is 2. What am I left with? I'm left with 3x plus 2. And yet again, you have created a binomial common factor here. Oops, can't see my underline. I didn't get the right color. There we go. Oh my goodness. Y'all, there we go. So once I have my binomial common factor, I think for these ones I usually do straight lines. Yeah. I'm going to take that and write it in my first set of brackets, 3x plus 2, and then I'm going to look at my remaining terms. I have x plus 2, and I'm going to write that. Voila. Let's do one more here, and then we're going to move to working with trinomials that actually have 2 variables. Okay, so let's do this one. 6x squared plus 5x, minus 5x plus 1. I want to use some different symbols here. Okay, if you want to pause the video here, pause the video here and try it for yourself, you can do that. I am just going to kind of power through this question. Okay, so I see that I am multiplying my a value and my c value, so I'm going to be looking for factors of positive 6. So my product is positive 6, and my sum is, it's going to be tight, there we go, negative 5. Perfect. So because I see I have a positive product and a negative sum, I know that both of the factors that I'm working with are going to have to be negative. All right, I'm going to start with negative 1, my favorite one. Negative 1 times negative 6 is going to give me positive 6, and when I add it, it's going to give me negative 7. That's no good. Okay, now I'm going to try negative 2 times negative 3. That's going to give me positive 6. And then when I add it, it's going to give me negative 5. Beauty. So here are the 2 factors I'm going to be working with. All right, let's bring down my first term here. And now I'm going to split apart my middle term, my negative 5x. It's going to be, my first factor was negative 2, and then x, and then my second factor was negative 3, and then x, and I've got plus 1. All right, let's take a look at these terms in relation to each other. I see 6x squared minus 2x. I know I can pull a 2x out of there, times 3x. And to get 2x times what equals negative 2x? Well, it's just times negative 1. And then I've got minus. So what can I use here? Well, I know that if I multiply by negative 1, I'll get my negative 3x. And if I want to get to that positive 1, I'm going to have to multiply by negative 1 over here. And I created my binomial common factor, which I write in my first set of brackets. There you have it. You can't really see that. It got cut off. Let me write it up here. There we go. Now you can see it a little bit better. Okay, let's do our last example here, which is we're working with trinomials that have two variables, which you're definitely going to see. 10x squared minus 3xy minus 4y squared. Okay, so let's not get freaked out and just follow the same steps that we always follow. Is there a GCF between my coefficients here? No, because 3 is an odd number and just ruins the party. Okay, look at my variables. Is there a GCF with my variables? No, because only two variables have y and only two variables have x, but not a combination between all three of them. Okay, so let's figure out, what am I trying to find factors of? I look at my a term and I look at my c term. 10 and negative 4. I'm still multiplying them. So I'm looking for factors of negative 40. So I'm looking for a product that is negative 40 and a sum that's negative 3. Perfect. I'm looking at my two signs here, and I know that they're telling me that I'm going to need to be working with factors that are either going to be positive and negative or negative and positive. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to start with 1. So let's start with 1 times negative 40. It's going to be negative 40. When I add, negative 39. Let's try negative 1 and 40. Still, when I multiply, it equals negative 40, but when I add it, it gives me positive 39. Okay, another factor is 2. Let's do 2 times negative 20. Gives me negative 40. When I add it, gives me negative 18. Negative 2 and 20. All right. Can I use 3? No. Can I use 4? Yeah. Okay, let's go to 4. 4 times negative 10 is negative 40. When I add it, equals negative 6. No good. Negative 4 times 10 is positive 6. All right, let's go to 5. Positive 5 times negative 8. That'll give me negative 40. And when I add it, it'll give me negative 3. Lovely. So I just found my two factors. Okay, so let's follow the same steps we've been using. Bring down that first term, 10x squared. And now I'm going to look at my middle term the same way that I have been. I'm going to break it apart with my factors that I found. I found positive 5xy, and I also found negative 8 as my second factor, xy. So if I look at these two terms here, I know that if I add them together, I'll get negative 3xy. Okay? And then we're bringing down that last term. There we go. So same thing as before, I'm going to be looking at these. To try to create that binomial common factor. So if I look at my first set of terms, I have 5x squared plus 5xy. Well, I see something in common with the coefficients. I see that the greatest common factor between them is 5. I can take out a 5 from both of them. But I can also take out an x from both of them because they both have an x variable. So what is going to be left inside my brackets? If I divide these terms by 5x, or I ask myself, what times 5x will give me the product? So 5x times what is going to give me 10x squared? Well, 5x times 2 is going to give me 10x squared. X. And now, what am I going to do to get to positive 5xy? Well, I'll just multiply by y. Okay, minus, now what do I have in common over here with my last two terms? 8xy minus 4y. Well, I see that my coefficients both have a 4 in common, and both of these terms also have a y. So I'm going to pull that out, and then I'm left with 2x plus y. So there we have our binomial common factor. We're going to write that in our first set of brackets, look at our remaining terms, and write it in our second set of brackets. And that is how you factor quadratic expressions in standard form when your a value is not equal to 1.